Good morning, everybody. We are starting today with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 11, Discourse 23. Still in the middle of the Uddhava Gita. This one is entitled The Episode of a Forbearing Brahmana. And since it begins with Krishna answering a question that was just asked, I'm just going to quickly recap the question from the end of the previous discourse. Uddhava had asked, tell us how I should get enlightened, thus attain a state which Krishna had described in the previous discourse, particularly such that one may reach a particular quality of enlightenment such that one is able to maintain one's steadiness of consciousness through being abused by other people. That was essentially the context of Uddhava's question. Sri Shuka, the son of Veda Vyasa, began again. Thus prayed to by Uddhava, the foremost of the Lord's devotees, and welcoming the words of his servant Uddhava, Lord Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation, the jewel of the Dasharhas, the story of whose exploits is worth listening to, addressed him as follows. The glorious Lord said, Indeed, there is scarcely any pious soul in this world, O pupil of the sage Brahaspati, who is really able to compose his mind when agitated by the abusive words uttered by a wicked fellow. A man is not so severely pained when pierced by shafts that have deeply entered his vital parts, as indeed by the shaft-like pungent words of the wicked that rankle in his heart and torment him. In this connection, the wise narrate, O Uddhava, a most sacred story told by some mendicant who was subjected to indignity by wicked people, and yet remained full of composure, recognizing it to be the consequence of his own deeds. I shall relate it to you. Please hear it with a fully concentrated mind. In the principality of Avanti, which in modern India is called Malwa, there lived a certain Brahmana, richly endowed with wealth, though parsimonious, meaning miserly, lascivious, greedy, and most irascible, and pursued the vocation of agriculture and trade. Neither relatives nor guests were honored by him even with bare words. Living in a house devoid of piety and of ritual acts, even his own person was never gratified with pleasures when there was time for it. He didn't even spend his money on his own pleasures. He just hoarded it up. The relations and servants, the wife and sons, as well as the daughters of that ill-behaved and stingy fellow felt disgusted with him, and not only did not do what was liked by him, but actually bore him ill will. The 5 claimants got angry at that Brahmana. So the 5 claimants are the 5 rightful claimants on a human being. These being the gods to whom worship is due, the ancestors to whom offerings are, like the annual offerings and so on, are due, other human beings such as guests and so on, to whom hospitality is due, the Brahmana rishis, who gave their lives to passing on knowledge to us, to whom we owe that we study what they taught, and all other living beings. So the 5 claimants got angry at that Brahmana, who simply guarded his wealth like a yaksha, as aforesaid, was destitute of piety and enjoyment, and had fallen from this world as well as from the next. Even the wealth that had cost him so much fruitless exertion through pursuits like agriculture, which entailed untold hardships of that Brahmana, whose residual stock of merit had run out through his neglect of the said claimants, the liberal-minded Uddhava, met with destruction. The relations seized a portion of the wealth of that unworthy Brahmana. Robbers laid their hands on another, O Uddhava, while the rest was lost through the agency of providence in the shape of fire, time, the king, and other human beings. His wealth having been lost in the aforesaid manners, the Brahmana, who was destitute of piety and enjoyment, and was neglected by his own people, gave way to anxiety that was hard to overcome. A very great despondency overtook the Brahmana, who, having lost his wealth, had been reduced to a pitiable condition, and had thus long been brooding over his lot and sorrowing with his throat choked with tears. And he said to himself as follows: "Oh, what a pity! In vain has this body been subjected to suffering by me, who took such great pains over the acquisition of wealth, neither for religious merit, nor even for self-gratification. Generally, the riches of misers never contribute to their own bodily comfort or happiness, because they are simply too miserly to spend it even on that. In this life, on the other hand, they conduce to the agony of their soul, and when a miser is no more in this world, they lead him to Naraka as a result of neglect of his obligatory and other duties and harm done to other beings. Just as white leprosy spoils an exterior worth coveting, even a little greed mars the immaculate glory of the glorious and the laudable qualities that exist in those possessing merit. Bodily exertion, apprehension, anxiety, and delusion fall to the lot of men engaged in the acquisition of wealth and augmenting and preserving wealth once it has been acquired, and anxiety is involved in its expenditure, its loss, and even its enjoyment. Since the tendency to misappropriate others' property, violence, mendacity, hypocrisy, covetousness, and anger, pride, arrogance, discord, animosity, distrust, a spirit of rivalry, and fondness for women in general, love of gambling, and addiction to wine, these 15 evils found in men are believed to have their source in wealth. Therefore, a seeker of moksha should abandon from a distance the evil going by the name of that which is solicited. One's own brothers, wife, parents, and uncles, as well as one's near and dear ones, as in friends, who were once full of love, nay, had identity of interest, are all estranged in no time by a single shell and converted into enemies. By a single shell, that may seem obscure. It refers to a really common gambling game played with shells, rolling cowrie shells like dice. Agitated and incensed over the question of the least wealth, these people cast at once affection to the winds, and full of jealousy, forsake in no time and even take the life of their rival. They who, having secured a human birth worthy of being solicited even by immortals, and thereto the status of a Brahmana, the foremost of the twice-born, and yet ignoring it, mar their self-interest and meet with an evil destiny. Having obtained this body, the gateway to heaven as well as to moksha, what mortal man would get attached to wealth, the abode of evil? He who guards his wealth like a yaksha neither propitiates the gods, the rishis, the ancestors, and other living beings, kinsmen, relatives, and other claimants, nor himself, and goes down. My fortune, lifetime, and strength, through which men of understanding achieve perfection, have been carelessly spent, occupied as I have been with my fruitless endeavors in the cause of amassing wealth. What can I possibly accomplish now, as I have grown old? Wherefore does a man alive to the evil repeatedly allow himself to be troubled so much by his futile endeavors for wealth? To be sure, this world stands fully enchanted by the deluding potency of some unknown and unseen agency. What purpose of a man who is already in the process of being devoured by death could be served by riches or by those that confer wealth on him? And what is to be gained by him through enjoyment sought after by the world or those that cater for such enjoyments? Or, for that matter, through any actions that are conducive to rebirth? Surely, Lord Sri Hari, who embodies in his person all the gods, by whom I have been reduced to this predicament, is pleased with me. And it is through his pleasure that despondency has come over me, which will serve me as a bark to cross the ocean of metempsychosis. Complacent of mind and awake to all my interests, I, who have luckily enough been reduced to such a plight, shall, during what little time, if any, is left at my disposal, attenuate my body through tapas. Let the gods, who are the rulers of the three worlds, shower their grace on me in the aforesaid state. I feel reassured by the thought that the ancient king Katwanga attained in no time Vaikunta, the realm of Lord Vishnu, who was a manifestation of Brahman. The glorious Lord continued. Having thus resolved in his mind, the Brahmana who belonged to Avanti undid the knots existing in his heart and turned out to be a peaceful ascetic, subsisting on alms. With his mind, senses, and breath fully controlled, he traversed this globe and entered towns and villages for begging alms, incognito and unattached. Seeing that aged merchant, untidy in appearance, wicked people ill-treated him in numerous insulting ways, O good Uddhava. Some snatched away his triple bamboo staff, which he had carried as a symbol of his renunciation. Others stole his begging bowl and his coconut shell kamandalu for carrying water. Some took away his seat and his string of rudraksha beads, and still others took his quilt of rags and even strips of cloth. Returning them once, or simply showing them as if offering back, they would snatch them away from the ascetic once more, just like tormenting him. While he partook on the riverside of the food got by way of begging alms, they would snatch away that too. People who were extremely vile spat and urinated on his head. They forced him to speak while he was silent and would thrash him if he did not. Calling him a thief, others threatened him with words, while others tied him with a rope, exclaiming, "Let him be bound, let him be bound." Some would insultingly taunt him, saying, "He is a rogue, though outwardly carrying a staff as an emblem of piety. Deserted by his own people and his wealth having been depleted, he has adopted this course of life." Others would ridicule him, saying, "Oh, this most robust fellow is firm as a huge mountain. Strong of resolution like a heron, he seeks to gain his end through silence," while others broke wind at him. People tied and restrained that Brahmana like a bird kept for diversion. Whatever affliction caused by any living being, brought about by providence, or having its source in his own body, like, aches and pains of old age and declining health and so on, thus came to him. He took each as his own lot to be worked out by him, and thus reconciled himself with it. Ill-treated by the basest of men bent on bringing about his downfall, and yet adhering to his duty and resorting to firmness of a sattvika type, the mendicant sang the following song. The Brahmana said, "Neither these people, nor any deity, nor the self, nor the stars, nor karma, nor the time spirit is responsible for my joys and sorrows. The Sruti texts declare the mind alone to be the cause of our joys and sorrows, the mind which sets going the course of worldly existence. The powerful mind indeed sets into operation the three gunas, and from the latter proceed actions of various kinds, immaculate, black, and bright. Thence crop up states of existence conforming to the color of those actions. Coexisting with a thinking mind, yet unattached to its operations and full of wisdom, God, who is a friend of mine, merely looks on with his unclouded vision. Accepting as its own self the mind which unfolds the universe within itself, and enjoying the objects of the senses through attachment with the three gunas, the jiva gets bound. Liberality to the poor, devotion to one's allotted duty, observance of the 5 niyamas, here listed as external purity, contentment, austerity, study of the scriptures and chanting of the divine name, and self-surrender to God, and the 5 yamas, non-violence, truthfulness, non-thieving, continence, and non-acquisition of property. Learning, meritorious acts, and noble vows all find their culmination in control of the mind, for subjugation of the mind constitutes the highest yoga. Say what is there to be accomplished through charitable gifts, etc., by him whose mind is perfectly calm and collected. And what other object can be achieved through these gifts, etc., by him whose mind is uncontrolled or inert? Indeed, others, the senses, are under the control of the mind, but the mind does not readily come under the control of anyone else. For the god of a mind is redoubtable and more powerful than the powerful, so that he who is able to bring it under control is adorable even to the gods. Unable to conquer that enemy in the guise of the mind, of irresistible tempo, which is difficult to conquer and which torments the vitals, some deluded persons thereupon make friends, neutrals, and enemies of various men, and wage a wicked warfare in this world. Taking this body, a creation of their mind, as their very self, the body of their son, wife, etc., as theirs, men of clouded judgment, laboring under the misapprehension that this is my own self and he is another, revolve in the world of matter, the end of which is difficult to reach. If, however, an individual is held to be responsible for our joy and sorrow, even in this case, what does it matter to the soul, which is neither the giver nor the experiencer of joy and sorrow? The capacity to give and experience joy and sorrow indeed belongs to 2 earthly bodies, the tormenting body and the tormented body. and not to the soul. If ever a man unwittingly bites his own tongue with his own teeth, which of them should he get angry with on his experiencing pain through such biting? If any god is held to be responsible for sorrow, let it be so. Even then, what does it matter to the soul? The capacity to inflict and suffer pain belongs to the two gods, inflicting and suffering the pain through the organs presided over by them, and not to the soul, which is devoid of form and beyond all change. When a limb in one's body is ever smitten by another, presided over by a different god, at which of the two limbs or gods should the man get angry? If the soul is responsible for our joys and sorrows, even then, what blame attaches to another, one's own intrinsic nature being responsible for one's joys and sorrows? There is no entity other than the soul. If there is, it is illusory. Hence there is neither joy nor sorrow. Wherefore then should one feel angry at all? If the stars are responsible for joys and sorrows, what responsibility attaches to the soul, which is birthless? They exert their influence only on a body, which is subject to birth and death. The astrologers declare the evil influence exerted by the stars as falling directly on a fellow star. At whom should the soul, which is other than the star as well as from the body born under its influence, get angry? If karma is held to be responsible for joys and sorrows, let it be. What responsibility attaches to the soul? For action is possible only in the event of there being a substance, material, and conscious. The body, however, is material, while the soul consists of pure wisdom. Hence, karma, which is the root of joy and sorrow, does not exist at this deeper level. At whom then should one feel angry? If, however, Kala, the time spirit, is held responsible for one's joy and sorrow, in that case, what responsibility attaches to the soul? For the soul is the same as Kala, both being identical to Brahman. No suffering can come to a part from the whole, any more than the heat of fire could burn an individual flame, or the coldness of ice could benumb a particle of ice. There can be no pair of contraries to the supreme. At whom should one be angry? Through none and at no place or time and on no account can there be any connection of the self which lies beyond Prakriti with the pairs of opposites, as there is in the case of Ahankara, the ego sense, which reveals the world. He who has awakened to this truth has no fear from created beings. Embracing the aforesaid conclusion regarding the Supreme Spirit, adopted by the most ancient and eminent seers, I, such as I am, shall get over this mundane existence, which is so difficult to cross, through worship of the feet of Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation, alone. The glorious Lord went on. Getting disgusted with the pleasures of sense and leaving his home and wandering over the earth, the ascetic, whose depression of spirits was gone, even though he had lost his fortune, and who did not budge from his righteous course of conduct, though ill-treated as aforesaid by the wicked, chanted the foregoing song. None other brings joy or sorrow to the jiva. Friends, neutrals, and foes, nay, the world is an illusion of the mind engendered by ignorance. Endowed with an intellect focused on me, therefore, O dear Uddhava, control the mind by all means, such is the highest consummation of yoga. He who hears or repeats or remembers with a concentrated mind this song chanted by the mendicant, bearing as it does on absorption in Brahman, is never overpowered by pairs of opposites. Thus ends the 23rd discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 24 is a dissertation on Sankhya Yoga. The glorious Lord began again. I shall now fully expound before you the truth underlying the doctrine of Sankhya, as conclusively ascertained by the ancient seers Kapila and others, realizing which a man bids fair to shed at once the delusion occasioned by the notion of difference. During the period of final dissolution, in the very first Satya Yuga, at the beginning of this Mahakalpa, and whenever there are men shrewd of judgment, the subjective consciousness, as well as the entire objective existence, was one absolutely undifferentiated substance indeed. That absolute undifferentiated reality, the infinite Brahman, which is beyond the ken of speech and the mind, became dual, in the shape of Maya and that which is reflected in it. Of the said two, one substance indeed is the well-known Prakriti, consisting of two aspects, cause and effect, while the other entity is consciousness, and that is called Purusha. Out of Prakriti, while its equilibrium was being disturbed by me, as motivated by the jivas, there appeared the three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. Out of the aforesaid was evolved the sutra as well as mahat, which is accompanied by the sutra. From mahat, even as it underwent modification, there appeared ahankara, the cosmic ego, which deluded the jiva by bringing about its identification with things like the body. Ahankara is of three kinds: sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika. It is the cause of the 5 tanmatras, the subtle elements, the 11 indriyas, which are the 5 senses of perception and the 5 organs of action, and the mind, including the deities presiding over the indriyas and the mind. And it is both spiritual and material. From the tamasika type of ahankara, which is the source of the tanmatras, came into being the gross elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. From the rajasika type of ahankara sprang up the indriyas, and from the sattvika type were evolved the 11 deities presiding over the indriyas in the mind, which are the deities presiding over the quarters, the 8 Ashtadikpalaka deities lumped together into one. So Indra, Agni, Yama, Nirti, Varuna, Vayu, Soma or Kubera, and Ishana. And then counted separately again, the wind god Vayu, the sun god Surya, Varuna, the god of water, the Ashwini Kumaras, Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the lord of paradise, Lord Vishnu, Mitra, and Prajapati, and the moon god, as well as the mind. Impelled by me and rendered operative in conjunction with one another, all the aforementioned categories evolved the cosmic egg, which served as my excellent sporting ground. In that egg, as it lay on the waters, appeared I. From my navel sprang up the lotus that bore the name of the universe, and on that lotus appeared Brahma, the self-born. Characterized by rajas and equipped with ascesis, the aforesaid Brahma, the creator of the universe, evolved by my grace the 3 spheres, Bhurloka, the earth realm, and in this case, Bhurloka is taken to include Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala lokas, Bhuvarloka, the aerial region, and Svarloka, here understood in its wider sense as comprising the 5 celestial worlds, Svarloka, Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapoloka, and Satyaloka, with their guardian deities. Svarloka, construed in the narrow sense of the first level of Svarloka, constituted the home of the Devas, Bhuvarloka of spirits, and Bhurloka of men and other living beings, animals, birds, reptiles, insects, etc. While the ethereal region extending beyond the 3 worlds constituted the home of the Siddhas, led by eminent Brahmana sages like Bhrigu. Brahma, the ruler of the universe, created a home for the Asuras and the Nagas underground in the subterranean regions known by the name of Atala and so on. In the aforesaid 3 spheres are worked out all the destinies of those prompted by the 3 gunas. Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapoloka, and Satyaloka are the goals, the successively higher goals, free from impurities, to be reached through yoga, ascesis, and sannyasa. My realm is the objective to be reached through the discipline of devotion. With me, having kala, or time, for my energy, as the dispenser of the fruit of actions, this living creation, yoked to karma, rises higher and descends in this world, which is a stream of the 3 gunas. Minute or large, lean or stout, whatever entity has come into being is pervaded by Prakriti and Purusha both. That which really constitutes the beginning as well as the end of a thing represents its middle too, and that alone is real, inasmuch as it pervades, inasmuch as it remains real, while other states are changing and temporary. Its modifications have only a practical value, even as the modifications of gold into different ornaments, or those of clay into different shapes of earthenware. That alone is real, adopting which as its material an earlier existence produces a later existence. That which is intended in a particular instance to be mentioned as the beginning and end of some effect is spoken of as real. The well-known material cause of this universe, Prakriti, he who presides over this Prakriti, the Supreme Person and the Time Spirit, which manifests the universe, all these three are, as a matter of fact, the same as I, the infinite. The elaborate process of creation ever continues in order of succession for the sake of the embodied soul, until the life of the universe comes to a close, or until the Lord so wills it. When contacted by me, the cosmic egg, in which the creation and dissolution of the worlds alternately takes place, becomes fit, along with the worlds, for disintegration into the 5 elements. The mortal body is withdrawn into the food. The food is reduced to seeds. The seeds get merged into the soil, while the earth is reduced to odor. Odor gets merged into water, and water is reduced to its own essential property, taste. Taste gets merged into fire, and fire is withdrawn into color. Color gets merged into the air, and the latter is reduced to the quality of touch, while that too gets merged into ether. Ether is reduced to the quality of sound. Even so, the Indriyas are merged in their respective causes, the deities presiding over them, and ultimately into the Rajasika Ahankara. The causes, O gentle one, are merged into their controller, the mind, which is a product of Sattvika Ahankara. Sound returns to the Tamasika Ahankara, and the mighty Tamasika Ahankara is merged in Mahattattva. The most powerful Mahattattva is reduced to its causes, the Gunas. The latter get dissolved into the unmanifest, primordial matter, and the unmanifest is merged in the time spirit, which has now ceased to operate. The time spirit is merged in the cosmic person, the creator of the universe, the director of Maya, and the latter in me, the birthless eternal spirit. The spirit, which is absolute, unconditioned, and is inferred by the creation and dissolution, stands by itself. How could there arise any misconception engendered by the notion of difference in the mind of one investigating into the spirit as aforesaid? And how could it persist any more than darkness would on the appearance of the sun in the sky? This is the process of differentiating the spirit from matter, which cuts the knot of doubt, and which has been set forth by me, the knower of the cause and the effect, from the standpoint of evolution and involution. Thus ends the 24th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 25 is entitled The Operation of the Three Gunas Described. The glorious Lord began again. Learn from me, O jewel among men, as I tell you how and by which of the gunas, working independently of one another, is man affected. Control of the mind and the senses, forbearance, sound judgment, ascesis, here meant in the form of strict adherence to one's prescribed course of conduct, truthfulness, compassion, retentive power, contentment, self-abnegation, absence of thirst for the pleasures of sense, belief in God, life after death, and so on, modesty and shrinking from unrighteous acts, liberality, etc., and remaining delighted in the self, forming the first group. Hankering after the pleasures of sense, self-centered activity, arrogance, insatiability, inflexibility, seeking after blessings, differentiation, self-gratification, bellicosity through arrogance, love of praise, jocularity, display of valor and exertion through might, forming the second group. And intolerance, stinginess, mendacity, malevolence, mendicancy, hypocrisy, languor, discord, grief and delusion, gloom and wretchedness, drowsiness, expectation, fear and indolence, forming the third group. These are severally the effects of sattva, rajas, and tamas, enumerated almost exhaustively. Now here the combined effect. The notion which is expressed in the words, I am, and these belong to me, is as a matter of fact a combined effect. And whatever is done with the mind, the objects of the senses themselves, and the vital airs, is also a combined effect of the three gunas. When a man is keenly devoted to religious merit, material possessions, and sense gratification, this is a combined effect of the three gunas, and conduce to reverence, wealth, and sense gratification, respectively. When a man is devoted to holy rites performed with interested motives, and when he sticks to the life of a householder and later on adheres to his duty, such devotion, etc., on his part is indeed a combined effect of the three gunas. From virtues like self-control, one should conclude a man to be endowed with sattva. From passion, etc., one should know him to be full of rajas, and from anger and other characteristics, he should infer him to be full of tamas. When a person worships me disinterestedly with devotion through his duties, one should know that man, or woman too, to be endowed with a sattvika disposition. When a man seeking the pleasures of sense worships me through his actions, one should know him to be of rajasika disposition. And when he does so expecting injury to others, etc., praying for harm to come to someone else, one should know him to be tamasika. The gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, affect the jiva alone and not me, inasmuch as they appear in the mind of the former, and because it is the jiva alone that is bound through them, getting attached to the elements. When sattva, which is illuminating, transparent, and tranquil, prevails over the other two gunas, a man is characterized by wisdom, piety, and happiness, etc. When rajas, which gives rise to attachment and the notion of diversity and spurs one to activity, gets the better of tamas and sattva, then one is seized with a craving for glory and fortune and is characterized by unhappiness and activity. When tamas, which perverts one's judgment, clouds one's vision, and induces dullness, dominates rajas and sattva, a man is characterized by grief, infatuation, and violence, sleep, and by expectation of help from others. When the mind is lucid and the senses recoil from their objects, when there is fearlessness in relation to the body and the mind is free from attachment, know that sattva, which is conducive to my realization, is predominant at that time. When getting agitated through activity, a man finds his intellect distracted on all sides. His senses know no rest. The organs of action are not quite at ease, and the mind is confused. Conclude from these symptoms that rajas holds sway. When getting obscured and incapable of being molded into the spiritual substance, the faculty of reason ceases to function, and the mind has its activity suspended, and when ignorance and gloom prevail, know that tamas is in the ascendant. When sattva guna is on the increase, the strength of the gods increases. That of the asuras when rajas is in the ascendant, and that of the rakshasas when tamas is predominant, O Uddhava. One should trace the waking state of a man from sattva, attribute his dream state to rajas, and deep slumber to tamas, and declare the fourth state as running through all the three states. Men following the courses of conduct prescribed in the Vedas go higher and higher through sattva by recourse By recourse to tamas, they descend lower and lower, embracing even inanimate life, while by recourse to rajas, they move in the intermediate state. Those who died when sattva was in the ascendant within their consciousness ascend to heaven. Those whose death occurred at a time when rajas was predominant return to the human world, take birth in another human body. Those whose death took place at a time when tamas was in the ascendant go down to naraka, while they who have transcended the three gunas attain to me alone. One's duty performed with the intention of propitiating me or without seeking any reward is of a sattvika character. That which is performed with the expectation of a reward is rajasika, while that which is performed with intent to harm others and is full of violence, etc., is tamasika. Knowledge concerning the absolute self is of a sattvika type, while that which relates to the self not unconnected with the body, etc., has rajas prevailing in it. The knowledge possessed by the uncultured, or that relating to natural acts such as eating and drinking, is tamasika, while that relating to me is beyond the gunas. The forest, as a matter of fact, is a sattvika place of abode, while the countryside is spoken of as rajasika. The gambling house is a tamasika dwelling, while my temple, which is hallowed by my constant presence in the form of an image, is beyond the gunas. An unattached doer is sattvika. He who is blinded with passion has been declared to be a rajasika agent. He who has lost his judgment, has lost the judgment of what is right and what is wrong in performing actions, is a tamasika agent, while a doer who depends on me is unaffected by the gunas. Faith in things spiritual is sattvika, while that in ritual acts and other worldly duties is rajasika. Faith in unrighteousness as though it were righteousness is tamasika, while that in my worship is beyond the realm of the gunas. Food, which is wholesome, pure, and obtained without taking pains, has been declared to be sattvika. That which is most agreeable to the palate is rajasika, while that which is unwholesome, conducive to suffering in the form of maladies, and impure is tamasika. Again, that which has been offered to me is beyond, that food which has been offered to me is beyond the three gunas. The joy springing from the self is sattvika, while that which proceeds from the objects of sense is rajasika. That which proceeds from infatuation, such as from intoxicating drugs or drinks, and cajolery is tamasika, while that arising from thought, etc., of me is beyond the sphere of the gunas. In this way, substance, place of abode, fruit, time, knowledge, action, the agent, faith, state of consciousness, form, and final destiny, everything is, as a matter of fact, constituted of the three gunas alone. All entities pervaded by the spirit and matter, whatever is seen, heard of, or pondered by the intellect, are constituted of the three gunas, O jewel among men. These states of existence of the embodied soul are brought about by the three gunas, and the actions performed by it. That embodied soul by which these gunas appearing in the mind have been thoroughly brought under control, O gentle one, and which stands firmly established in me by treading the path of devotion, gets qualified for becoming one with me. Therefore, having obtained this body in which knowledge and realization can be had, and completely shaking off attachment to the gunas, let the wise worship me, or take refuge in me. Free from attachment, and with his senses brought under control, a wise man should carefully worship me, and given over to contemplation, should get the better of rajas and tamas by duly cultivating sattva. And possessed of a tranquil mind and united with me, he should thoroughly subdue sattva too, by means of sattva. Rid of the gunas, the embodied soul disowns the subtle body and attains to me. Completely disunited from its jivahood, as well as from the gunas appearing in the mind, and full of me, consisting of perfect bliss, the jiva neither goes out nor turns inward. He gets liberated during his very lifetime. Thus ends the 25th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 26. The utterance of Pururava, bearing on aversion for the pleasures of sense. The glorious Lord began again. Having obtained this body, the medium of perceiving my true nature, he who has betaken himself to the course of conduct pleasing to me, duly attains to me, his very self, the embodiment of supreme bliss, dwelling in his own heart. Completely freed, by means of firm devotion to the path of knowledge from the bondage of matter, the jiva does not get attached to the unreal objects of senses, though living in the midst of such objects, which are mere creations of Maya, and are being falsely perceived. One should on no account cultivate the fellowship of unworthy men given to the gratification of their sexual urge and satisfaction of their hunger alone. For the follower of one such sensualist falls into the blinding darkness like a blind man following another blind man. Falling a prey to infatuation due to separation from Urvashi, and eventually disgusted with the pleasures of sense, on his grief having been overcome as a result of his meeting her once more at Kurukshetra, and attaining to her realm in heaven by offering oblations to the sacred fire entrusted to him by the Gandharvas and thereby propitiating the Devas, Emperor Pururava, the son of Ila of extensive fame, sang the following song. As she went leaving him alone in the bed, the monarch felt greatly perturbed and followed her in a state of nature, meaning naked, like a madman crying, "Tarry, my cruel wife." Deprived of his reason by Urvashi, he was aware neither of the night that passed nor of the coming ones for years together, while repeatedly enjoying the trivial pleasures without satiety. Pururava sang. Later, upon having realized the futility of his being so completely addicted to these sensual pleasures, astounding is the magnitude of my infatuation, my judgment having been clouded by passion. Inasmuch as these years of my life have passed unnoticed by me, while my neck remained clasped and embraced by my celestial wife. Charmed by her, alas, I did not perceive when the sun set nor when it rose, nor did I know of the days, totaling numbers of years that rolled by. How great is the infatuation of my soul, by which myself, a universal monarch, the crest jewel of kings, was made a toy dear of in the hands of women. Crying like a madman, all naked, I followed the woman as she went away deserting me, a ruler of man and my kingdom, like a straw. Whence could there be any glory, majesty, or lordship in me, who followed a departing woman even like a donkey kicked by a she-ass? What will be gained through worship of gods, renunciation, ascesis, study of scriptures, solitary life, or observing silence by him whose heart has been stolen by women? Fie upon me, a fool, though fancying myself to be a learned man, who, blind as I am to my own interests, have been enslaved by women, just like a bull or a donkey, even after attaining sovereignty. Although I have been enjoying the inebriating nectar of Urvashi's lips for multitudes of years, my hankering, mind-born as it is, knows no satiety, any more than fire could be quenched by pouring oblations into it. Who else than Lord Vishnu, the ruler of those reveling in the self, can possibly succeed in reclaiming a mind captivated by a lewd woman? Even though I was admonished by that celestial woman in truthful words, finding place in a Vedic hymn, the great infatuation lurking in my mind, perverse of intellect and uncontrolled of mind as I am, does not depart. Or what offense could have been done by her against us, any more than by a rope, against a man who, being ignorant of its reality, conceived it to be a serpent? For it is I, whose senses are uncontrolled, that stands to blame, and obviously not her. How incompatible are this dirty body, full of bad smell, etc., impure, and the excellences attributed to it, such as fragrance, purity, and delicacy, etc. It was through ignorance, as a matter of fact, that the aforesaid virtues were wrongly attributed by me to her body. It cannot be definitely ascertained whether the body is the property of one's parents, one's wife, one's master, to fire, the dog, and the vulture, the soul, or its near and dear ones. Man gets attached to such an impure body, which has a contemptible end, into worms, or being devoured by animals, or by being burned, and lavishes praise on it in the words, "Oh, how delightful is the face of this woman with a shapely nose and full of charming smiles." How little difference is there between those who take delight in the body of a woman and the worms wallowing in ordure, urine, and pus, who also take delight in the very same body later. Therefore, he who is alive to his interests should on no account associate even through sight with the fair sex, nor with slaves of women. It is through contact of the senses with their objects that the mind is agitated, not otherwise. No agitation follows from an unseen or unheard of object. The mind of a man who does not direct his senses towards their objects becomes still and gets composed. Therefore, one should not associate through the senses with the fair sex, nor with those devoted to woman. The five senses in the mind do not deserve to be trusted even by the wise, much less by indiscreet men like me. The glorious Lord continued, singing thus at the top of his voice. The celebrated Pururava left the realm of Urvashi, and having realized me as his very self in his own heart, and shaken off by dint of that realization his delusion, retired forthwith from the world. Therefore, eschewing evil company, a prudent man should associate with the righteous. The latter cut asunder the deep attachment of his mind by their precepts. The righteous are free from craving, have their mind fixed on me, are perfectly serene, view everything alike as an embodiment of Brahman, are free from the senses of mindness as well as from the ego sense, are unaffected by the pairs of opposites, and own no property. In the midst of those exceedingly fortunate people, O highly blessed Uddhava, my stories are always told, stories that are salutary to mankind and eradicate the sin of those that take delight in them. They who listen to me, they who listen to them, sing them, and as a matter of fact, heartily approve of them and are respectful towards me, exclusively devoted to me, meaning devoted for devotion's sake, expecting no other return, and are full of reverence, acquire devotion to me. What else remains? So it may sound funny to say those who are devoted to me thereby acquire devotion to me, but the idea is that the devotion grows through ongoing engagement in it. What else remains to be achieved by the pious soul who has attained devotion to me, endowed with endless virtues, the ultimate cause of all, the embodiment of truth, consciousness, and bliss? As cold dismay and darkness disappear in the case of a man who betakes himself to the glorious Agni, so do the rigidity and obtuseness, the fear of future births and its root, ignorance, get dissolved in the case of the man who renders loving service to pious souls. Just as a strong bark is the supreme, as in a strong boat, is the supreme resort to those who are being drowned in water, noble souls who have realized Brahman and have attained perfect peace of mind are the highest resort to those who, having sunk once to the lowest depths, are coming once more to the surface in the ocean of mundane existence. Food is life itself to those that breathe. I am the only shelter to the afflicted, and piety is the wealth for men in the other world. Saints are the resort to him who is afraid of being born on this plane. Having fully risen, the sun bestows light to the external eye, whereas holy men confer on those enjoying their fellowship inner eyes in the shape of knowledge relating to the saguna and nirguna aspects of Brahman. Holy men, therefore, are veritable gods as well as one's near and dear ones. They are one's very soul. They are myself. Rid in this way of longing for Urvashi's realm or her sight, and free from attachment due to the fellowship of saints, Pururava, the son of Sudyumna, went about this globe reveling in the self, so the tradition goes. Thus ends the 26th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 27. The yoga of formal worship. Formal as in ritual worship. Uddhava submitted. Explain the course of discipline consisting of formal worship intended to propitiate you, O Lord. Also, what type of devotees worship you in what manner and from what motive, O protector of devotees? Sages such as Narada, the divine Vyasa, and Brahaspati, Angira's son, the guru of the Devas, repeatedly declare this as conducive to the highest good of men. It emanated from your lotus-like lips, and the divine Brahma taught it to his sons, the foremost of whom is Bhrigu, and Lord Shiva imparted it to his divine spouse, goddess Parvati. It is highly commendable for all the grades of society and stages of life, and I consider it to be the best of all the courses of discipline conducive to blessedness. For women and Shudras as well, a bestower of honor. Explain this course, untying once for all the bonds of karma, O lotus-eyed Lord, to me who stand devoted and attached to you, O suzerain Lord of the rulers of the universe. The glorious Lord began again. Since there is no end to the branch of the Vedas dealing with ritual acts, which is unlimited in scope and infinite in volume, O Uddhava, I shall discuss this topic of Kriya Yoga in a nutshell, in order of sequence, in its true perspective. The procedure of my worship is threefold: Vedic, Tantrika, and mixed, a combination of Vedic and Tantrika. Of these three, one should duly worship me according to that procedure alone, which is liked by him. Hear from me the way in which, having attained the status of a twice-born as enjoined by the Veda prescribing his duties, when the worshipper happens to be a member of the twice-born classes, a man should worship me with devotion and reverence. Full of devotion, he should worship me, his teacher and father, with requisite material, flowers, etc., with guilelessness in the shape of entertaining no hope for its reward. In an image, a raised ground, leveled, squared, and prepared for a yajna, or in the sacred fire, the sun, water, in their own heart, or in the person of a brahmana. Having cleansed his teeth with the end of a small green twig, crushed with the teeth and converted thus into a brush, he should first perform his ablutions for the purification of his body. The bath should be repeated with the utterance of both types of mantras, Vedic as well as Tantric mantras, after first daubing the whole body with clay, as well as with fresh cow dung, sacrificial ashes, and so on, and going through other preliminaries, such as invoking the presence of the Ganga and other sacred waters, the Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Godavari, Kaveri, Narmada, and Sindhu, offering arghya to them and seeking their permission for a bath. Undertaking a noble vow of propitiating myself, he should perform my worship, which wipes out all karmas, side by side with duties such as saying the Sandhya prayers that have been enjoined by the Veda. An image has been declared to be of 8 kinds, according as it is carved out of stone or wood, made of molten and cast metal, such as brass or bronze, clay or sandal paste, etc., painted on a wall, etc., made of sand or carved out of a precious stone, or conceived by the mind alone. An image, which is a temple of the Lord, is again of 2 varieties, movable and immovable, like a portable one or one that's like built into a wall or built into the floor. The ceremonies of invoking the presence of or of bidding farewell to a deity are not necessary in worship done through the medium of an immovable image, O Uddhava. There is option in the matter of invocation in the case of a movable image, other than a shalagrama stone, where no invocation is needed, while both must be done in the worship through the medium of a raised ground or through an image of sand. Only an image other than a painted one or that made of clay or sandal paste should be bathed. Obviously, don't bathe an image if it will literally destroy the image to do so. In all other cases, mere sprinkling all round with water is enough. My worship through images, etc., should be done with excellent articles. In the case, however, of a devotee who is free from wiles, it may be conducted with articles, whatever articles are easily available. In the heart, of course, worship is offered with love alone. Bathing and decoration with ornaments is highly desirable only in an image, O Uddhava. In a raised ground, of course, the conceptual installation of the various deities in their respective place, with the utterance of formulas sacred to each, in a sacred fire, the offerings of oblation soaked in ghee, in the sun, respect shown to the sun god in the form of offering arghya and waiting upon him with prayers, and in water, worship through gratification by offering water, etc., is considered most desirable. Even water offered with reverence by a devotee is most pleasing to me. How much more then are sandal paste, incense, flowers, light, and food, etc., dear to me? On the other hand, anything offered by one who is not a devotee does not contribute to my pleasure, even if it is abundant. Having got together all the requisite articles of worship, and prepared a seat with blades of darbha grass pointing to the east, and sitting on it with his face turned towards the east or the north, or in front of the image to be worshipped, in the event of the latter being immovable. So forget about what cardinal direction you're facing. If there's an image, face the image. Otherwise, face east or north. And himself pure, the votary should commence worshipping. Having consecrated himself by assigning the various syllables of the mantra to be used in the worship to the different parts of his hand as well as to the limbs of his body, he should gently rub the image with a view to wiping off the coat of sandal paste on it, the coat of sandal paste on it, when it has been similarly consecrated, and then duly adorned with fresh sandal paste and flowers, etc., the pitcher full of water to be used for worship from the beginning to the end, and the vessel containing water for sprinkling and thereby consecrating the utensils and articles of worship, etc., consecrating with that water the temple, the articles of worship, as well as himself, the votary should get ready 3 vessels, filling them with water taken from the pitcher, and providing them with necessary accessories for offering padya, arghya, and achamaniya, water for washing the feet and hands and rinsing the mouth of the deity, respectively. The scriptures dealing with the details of worship lay down that the following accessories should be used along with water when washing the feet and hands and rinsing the mouth of the deity. Grains of shyamaka rice, which are very small as compared with ordinary rice, blades of durva grass, lotus flowers, the Vishnukranta herb, etc., are approved for use with the water intending for washing the feet of the Lord with. Sandal paste, flowers, unbroken grains of rice, grains of barley, blades of the sacred kusha grass, sesamum seeds, mustard seeds, and blades of panak grass, durva grass. These 8 substances have been prescribed for being used with the water intended for washing the hands of the deity with, while the water intended for rinsing the mouth of the deity should be accompanied by the nutmeg, cloves, and the berries of the kankola plant, etc. The worshipper should then consecrate the said 3 vessels of water for washing the feet and hands and rinsing the mouth of the deity by breathing into them the sacred formulas connected with the heart, the head, and the tuft of hair on the crown. Respectively. And lastly, the Gayatri mantra into all of them. Within his own body, conceived as dried up by the gastric wind and then consumed by the fire at the navel, and ultimately revived by the nectar flowing from the moon located in the forehead, and thus thoroughly sublimated, he should meditate on my supreme and subtle form, of which the jiva is but a particle, installed on the lotus of the heart, and contemplated by accomplished souls at the end of nada, the 5th part of the sound of the pranava. On his body being permeated, as a house by the light emanating from a lamp, by that subtle form, contemplated as his own being, he should worship me in that form first with conceptual articles, and full of that presence, having first done the puja in your mind, he should then invoke my presence in the image, and having installed me there and assigned the syllables of the mantra to the various limbs of the image, proceed with my worship. Having mentally prepared a high seat for me with dharma, jnana, vairagya, and aishvarya for its feet, adharma, ajnana, avairagya, and anaishvarya for its 4 sides, and sattva, rajas, and tamas for its 3 planks constituting its base, and the 9 shaktis, vimala, utkarshini, jnana, kriya, yoga, prahvi, satya, ishana, and anugraha, and mentally spread on it a lotus of 8 petals, shining bright with its pericarp and filaments, and with the orbs of the sun and other luminaries fixed on it. He should install me on it, and offer to me various articles of worship, such as water for washing my feet and hands and rinsing my mouth with, according to the spirit of the Vedas and the Tantras both, and with a view to securing both worldly enjoyment and final moksha. He should further worship in their order of sequence the chakra sudarshana, the conch named Panchajanya, the mace called Modaki, the sword, the bow and arrows, as well as the emblems of Lord Sankarshana, the plow and the pestle, in the 8 directions, and the Kaustuba gem, the Vaijayanti garland, and the mark of Srivatsa, all 3 on the chest of the Lord. He should likewise worship the 8 attendants of the Lord, Nanda, Sunanda, Prachanda, Chanda, Mahabala, Bala, Kumoda, and Kumodekshana, as standing around the Lord in the 8 directions, and his carrier, the bird Garuda, as facing the Lord, ready for service. He should also worship by offering them water to wash their hands with, and so on, this whole procedure, the goddess Durga, Lord Vinayaka, the sage Vyasa and Vishvaksena, all these 4 as surrounding the Lord in the 4 ordinal corners. His own guru as standing to his left, and the gods, the 8 guardians of the spheres, each in his relative position according to the direction, meaning Indra to the east, Agni to the southeast, Yama to the south, Niriti to the southwest, Varuna to the west, Vayu to the northwest, Kubera to the north, Ishana to the northeast, in that sequence. The votary should, if there is sufficient wealth, daily bathe me with water made fragrant by sandal paste, ushira grass and aromatic grass, camphor, saffron, and aloe wood, chanting all the while sacred texts such as the Suvarna Gharmanuvaka from the Rig Veda, the Mahapurusha Vidya, the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda, and the texts of Sama Veda, such as the Rajana Sama, and the Rohina Sama. There's also certain mantras prescribed here from the Rig Veda, from the Atharva Veda, the first 16 mantras of Shukla Yajurveda, book 31, certain chapters from the Krishna Yajurveda and the Samaveda. My devotee should also lovingly set me off in the proper way at the end of the worship with raiments, the sacred thread, jewels, wreaths of basil leaves, scents, and sandal paste. The worshiper should then, not at the end of the worship, but adorn me in the proper way. The worshiper should then reverently offer to me water to wash my feet and rinse my mouth with, sandal paste, flowers and grains of unbroken rice for decoration, incense, light like a lit lamp or candle, and articles of food. If there be wealth, one should offer as food to me daily or at least on festive occasions, jaggery or sugar, rice boiled in milk and sweetened with sugar, ghee, large round cakes of ground rice, sugar and sesame seeds and cooked in oil, piles of sweet cakes made of meal and sugar and fried in ghee, lumps of sweets composed of meal cooked in ghee, a kind of porridge made of wheat flour with ghee, milk and molasses, curds and seasoned soup of pulses. Offering a brush made of a small green twig with one of its ends crushed for cleansing my teeth, perfumed oil for anointing my body with, a paste of saffron, and camphor powder for being rubbed on the various parts of my body in order to free it from dirt, bathing my image with a preparation composed of milk, curds, ghee, honey, and sugar, as well as with scented water, clothing me with costly silk and adorning me with jewels, sandal paste, and wreaths, etc., and putting a mirror before me in order for me to see how I look, offering me food which could be easily swallowed, as well as that needing chewing, together with fragrant water, betel leaves, a bed of flowers, etc., and singing songs and dancing should be arranged at least on a sacred day, on the Ekadashi days or on the full moon, and preferably every day if one's means allow it. Depositing fire in a sacrificial pit dug and constructed with due ceremony, along with 3 zone-like constructions, a hollow and a raised ground, one should collect and concentrate it with the hand once it has been kindled by fanning it. Then, enclosing it on all sides with 20 blades of kusha grass, one should sprinkle water on the kusha blades all round, and duly replenishing it with fuel while uttering the vyahritis, bhu, bhuva, and so on, and placing to the north of the sacred fire articles to be offered to the fire and sprinkling them with water taken from the consecrating vessel. One should contemplate me in the fire as shining brightly like molten gold, distinguished by 4 arms resplendent with a conch, discus, mace, and lotus, calm and composed, clad in silk possessing the golden hue of the filaments of a lotus, adorned with a brilliant diadem, bangles, a girdle around my waist, and excellent armlets, bearing the mark of Srivatsa on my bosom, distinguished with the lustrous Kaustuba gem and with a garland of sylvan flowers. Visualizing and worshipping me as such, and casting into the fire sacrificial sticks soaked in ghee, and having made the 2 offerings of ghee, known by the name of agharas, and consisting of sprinkling ghee across the pit from the northern to the southern end, and then from the southern to the northern end, uttering the formulas Prajapataye Svaha and Indraya Svaha, and 2 more offerings known by the name of Ajya Bhagas, and consisting of pouring ghee into the sacred fire, uttering the formulas Agnaye Svaha and Somaya Svaha, respectively, should offer oblations soaked in ghee, uttering the fundamental mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya, and then the hymn known by the name of the Purusha Sukta, consisting of 16 mantras from the Rig Veda, taking a fresh oblation in a limited quantity with every utterance. The knowing devotee should further offer oblations through the fire to Dharma and others, in the order mentioned before, uttering the name of the deity with the indeclinable Svaha added to it, and then the oblation known as the Svishtakrit, which is offered at the end of the sacrifice, and is so called because it is believed to turn the sacrifice into a success. Having worshipped me as indwelling the fire and saluted me, the votary should offer oblations in the 8 directions to my attendants, Nanda and others mentioned before, and then returning to the place of worship and again taking his seat before me, should repeat the Mula mantra as long as possible, contemplating all the while on the infinite in the form of Lord Narayana. Then, visualizing me as having finished my dinner in the meantime, he should offer water to me for rinsing my mouth with, and again inviting me back to my seat, should make over the remnants to Vishvaksena, the foremost attendant to the Lord, to have first pick of the Lord's leftovers of the dinner that he didn't eat. Again, offering betel leaves, etc., containing aromatic substances intended to perfume the mouth, he should then conclude the worship by showering on me flowers placed in the hollow of one's joined palms. Celebrating, recounting, and dramatically representing my exploits, dancing out of joy while doing so, and narrating or listening to my stories, one should remain immersed in joy all the while. Glorifying me through long or short hymns found in ancient works such as the Vedas and Puranas, as well as through those composed by human beings, like bhajans and so on. And praying in the words, "Be pleased, O Lord," he should salute me falling flat on the ground like a log, placing his head at my feet and with his arms joined together, and saying, "O Lord, protect me, afraid as I am of the ocean of worldly existence, rendered all the more fearful by the presence of the crocodile in the shape of death, and come to you for protection." Praying thus, he should respectfully place on his head, as if given by me, the flowers, etc., offered to me, and in case he must send back the deity from the image, in the event of its being intended for temporary worship, the divine effulgence invoked into the image should be drawn back from it and merged into the divine flame burning in the lotus in the heart, and the image deposited into some holy tank or river. One can worship me through whichever of the media, an image he conceives a reverence for on a particular occasion, for being the soul of the universe, I dwell in all created beings, as well as in the self of the worshipper. Worshipping me as aforesaid in accordance with the courses of worship taught in the Vedas, as also in the Tantras, a man secures at my hand success of the kind coveted by him both here and hereafter. One who can afford to do so should cause a strong, enduring house of worship to be built, and having duly installed my image in it, should cause beautiful flower gardens to be laid out, and make a formal grant in favor of the temple, of fields, markets, towns, or villages helpful for the daily worship, occasional congregations on sacred days, and festivals. Granting these for the regular and uninterrupted conduct of worship from day to day, as well as on specially sacred days, one bids fair to enjoy a fortune as great as mine. Through installation of an image, one bids fair to acquire sovereignty of the entire globe. By erecting a temple, he is sure to attain dominion of all the three worlds. Through worship, one can hope to reach the realm of Brahma, and through all these three combined, one can attain a state of equality with me. He who worships me as aforesaid secures union in thought with me through devotion, and through such course of disinterested devotion, one attains to me alone. He who takes away the endowment, made either by himself or by others in favor of the image of a deity or a Brahmana, continues for 10 crores of years to be born as a creature living on ordure. Such a destiny awaits hereafter the agent as well as his assistant, prompter, and supporter too, since each of them is a partner in the act, and the reward or punishment is greater according as the action is more dignified or more atrocious. Thus ends the 27th discourse in Book 11 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And we can pause there for today. This was the course of worship done like in formal Vaishnava temples. Obviously, this is like the elaborate Shodashopachara procedure done according to the Vaishnava, the Agamas and the Pancharatra texts and so on. It's very elaborate for most people's home worship. Some people do it as part of home worship though. So thank you all very much for coming.
Thanks, Deva.
Yeah.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great, amazing references to the threefold worship of Krishna in that last part. Yeah. And I'm curious, like how would you distinguish, Vedic and Tantric? How would you describe all of those references to that? How would you?
Yeah, well, Vedic and Tantric, they're rooted in different texts. There are specific texts called the Vedas, which lay out certain modes of worship, and there are specific texts called the Tantras, which lay out specific modes of worship. And Krishna began the chapter by saying, you can follow Vedic worship, you can follow Tantric worship, you can follow a mixture of the two, and simply do whichever you like. He explicitly said, just do whichever way you like, whatever way appeals to you. Typically the formal Vedic worship is much more demanding and difficult. It is like, it's done by people. The reason there's a whole Brahmana caste devoted to it is because you basically have to be trained in it from birth, and it will occupy most of your life to really do the Vedic ritual worship in that way. It's like a full-time job.
Wow.
The tantric worship is a lot more flexible, and for this reason, a lot more common. It's much more open to the masses. But you can also do a mixture of the two, as he said at the very beginning of the chapter. Adopt whichever mode of worship you like that works well for you and that appeals to you. The point is to give expression and structure to the devotion. So whatever works best for you as an individual practitioner is the right mode for you to adopt.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming.
Well, thanks so much,
Thank
David.
you.
Jai
Hari
Shri
Bol.
Krishna. Hari Bol.
Haribol.